Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about creepy encounters in the Great Smoky Mountains. Get ready, because these stories won't let you sleep comfortably for weeks. But before we begin, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now let's start. I booked a cabin because I needed to be unreachable. Just me, some books I'd been pretending to read, and the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I wasn't running from anything dramatic. No breakup, no job loss. Just a slow, creeping static of everyday life building up until my brain felt like a closed tab that never finished loading. The listing described the place as secluded, minimalist, no cell service, off-grid, which sounded like bliss. It was near a place called Sparrow Ridge, nothing more than a dot on a map west of Bryson Ridge. I found it through a forum thread, not a mainstream rental site. The host's instructions were handwritten. Directions like turn right at the post with the yellow tape and pass the rusted gate, then follow the road down until the second mailbox with no number. The deeper into the mountains I got, the less real the world behind me felt. The cabin itself was bare. One room, steep A-frame, like someone started building a playhouse and forgot to stop. No electricity. Just a squat gas lamp bolted to the wall and a few matches in a mason jar. A composting toilet out back in a little shack that smelled like wet pine and mildew. A cot, a wood stove, and a square table with one chair. Honestly, it was perfect. I didn't tell anyone the actual location. Just said I'd be somewhere in the Smokies and out of reach until Sunday. A few people texted, "Have fun," and that was that. The first day I just existed. I unloaded the few things I brought, some food, a battery-powered speaker, a couple of books, a hoodie that still smelled like my old apartment. I built a fire outside, warmed a can of soup, drank cider from the bottle. That night I lay on the cot staring at the rafters while the wind made the wood creak in slow, steady groans. It felt like sleeping in a giant wooden lung. The next morning I found the old map in a sleeve inside the binder labeled cabin instructions. It was hand-drawn, with uneven lines and notes like no longer passable and watch for bees. The trail behind the cabin wasn't even marked at the road, but I found it narrow, barely visible between overgrowth. It was a peaceful hike at first. Everything smelled earthy and sweet, like moss and sun-warmed leaves. About 3 miles up, I reached a rocky bluff with a view of the whole valley. Nothing but green layers of hills rippling toward the horizon. I sat down, peeled an apple, and pulled up the offline map on my phone just to check how far I'd gone. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Quick, unsteady, like someone darting through underbrush behind me. I stood up, turned around, expecting some guy in trail runners to come crashing through. No one. It went dead quiet. No more snapping twigs, not even birds. I waited. Nothing. All the way back down, I kept expecting to hear it again. My ears strained for it. I felt like something was just behind me, matching my steps a half beat late, stopping when I did. The kind of presence that presses on your neck, just enough to make you hyper-aware of being exposed. That evening, I didn't light a fire, just stayed inside with the lantern. I read half a chapter of some mystery novel but couldn't focus. My eyes kept drifting to the window. Then the knock came. 3 soft, deliberate knocks on the wall, right under the kitchen window. I didn't breathe, just listened. Not wind, not debris falling. This was distinct. Knuckles. I got up slowly and stepped onto the porch, switching on the old floodlight the host had said sometimes works. It buzzed, flickered, and lit up the clearing. Nothing. No footprints, no animal. Just the clearing and the black forest crouched around it. I stood out there for maybe 10 minutes, arms crossed, like that would somehow make me safer. I told myself I must have heard a branch fall weird, maybe a squirrel with terrible balance. Inside, I locked the door, shut the curtains, and let the lantern burn until it sputtered out. Next morning, I saw them. 2 prints, right under the window. Bare feet. Long toes. Widespread. Almost like the foot was trying to grip the earth. The heels barely made an impression, like the person had tiptoed through. I crouched down and stared at them for a long time. Not because I thought they'd disappear, because I didn't want to admit they were real. I snapped a picture, then immediately felt stupid and deleted it. Felt like proof I wasn't ready to have. Around noon, I drove into the nearest town, Woodpine, bought crackers I didn't need and stared too long at the cashier, hoping they'd say something that would snap me out of whatever this was. They didn't. Just handed me my bag and said, "Y'all staying out past Ridge Point? Not much out there but rock and rot." Back at the cabin, I left the groceries in the car. Sat behind the wheel for almost 30 minutes, engine off, windows up, just staring at the trees. I told myself I was being dramatic. I even laughed once, out loud, but my hand trembled when I reached for the door. That night, sleep didn't come. 1:17 in the morning, I heard it again. Not knocks this time. A dragging sound. Along the wall. Slow, even, deliberate. It started on the far side of the cabin and moved past the windows in a single long scrape, like someone brushing a branch or their hand across the wood. I lay frozen in the cot. The curtains were thin. I could see just enough to know something was out there. Tall, moving. Its shape wrong in that way your brain doesn't want to acknowledge. Limbs too long, neck bent too far to one side like someone yanked it mid-motion. Then it stopped, right outside the window, and it spoke. "Come out, Halden." The voice came from outside, but I felt it inside my head, like it bypassed my ears. I didn't react, didn't breathe. It said it again, but differently this time. 3 voices, all layered on top of each other. One was my mom's voice, soft but shaky, like when she used to wake me for school. Another was deeper, male, rough, like my old roommate Matt after a night out. The third I didn't recognize. Cold, urgent. "Come out. Come see what's waiting." It didn't try the door, didn't knock again. Just stood there muttering fragments of my life in a chorus that didn't belong together. Eventually, the shadow stepped back into the trees. I stayed in bed until sunrise, didn't move. When it was light enough to see clearly, I packed up. No breakfast. No coffee. No checking the trail or the prints or the stupid curtain. I left the key in the drop box outside the rental office, drove for hours. Didn't even stop for gas until I saw a real highway sign. I told myself it was a dream. Sleep deprivation. A weird mix of solitude and leftover cider. 2 weeks later, a package showed up. No return address. My name on the front in thick red marker. Inside was a folded curtain. Faded floral. The exact same kind from the cabin. And tucked inside it, a photo. It was me, asleep in my bed, face turned to the window, taken from outside. In the reflection, there was a pale face. Not mine, but close. Like someone wearing a skin that looked like mine. The eyes were faintly glowing red. I moved my bed away from the window, bought blackout curtains, and I haven't slept next to glass since. I was 24 when it happened. I had picked up a seasonal maintenance job at a campground in the Blue Hollow Mountains. Not exactly a career move, but at the time, I wasn't looking for much. I just wanted a break from people, noise, traffic, and the constant buzzing in my head that never seemed to stop when I lived in the city. So when I saw a post for a quiet maintenance gig out in the woods, basic upkeep, nothing fancy, I took it without thinking twice. The campground wasn't huge. A few dozen sites spread across a wide, forested valley, tucked beneath steep ridges. The kind of place where your phone loses signal before you're even out of the parking lot. They gave me a key to a tiny cabin behind the ranger station. Just a single room with a cot, a table, and a rattling little heater that sounded like it was coughing to death every time it kicked on. But it was peaceful. The air was sharp and clean. Nights were dark and quiet. It was what I needed. My days settled into a rhythm quickly. Wake up early, boil water for coffee on the camp stove, check the pump stations to make sure nothing was leaking, pick up trash if campers had left any behind, clean out fire pits, haul propane tanks to and from the supply shed. It was physical work, but nothing complicated. I liked that. No questions, no long explanations. Evenings were for rounds. I'd grab a flashlight, walk the gravel paths, and check each campsite. Mostly, I was making sure no one had left food out. You'd be surprised how many people think a half-zip bag of marshmallows on a picnic table is fine overnight. Raccoons were usually the first to show up, but bears weren't shy either, especially late in the season. One night in late October, the air had a sharp snap to it, colder than usual, even for the hills. Most of the weekend crowd had cleared out, leaving only a handful of die-hard campers. The rest of the sites were empty. I was on my usual loop, flashlight in hand, bundled in 2 jackets. It was almost 11 when I passed Site 42, tucked near the edge of the woods. A family had checked out that afternoon. The site was clean, but they left a big red cooler beside the fire ring. I cursed under my breath. That's exactly the kind of thing that brings trouble. I grabbed the handle and hauled it uphill to the storage shed by the bathhouse. The cooler was heavier than it looked, still had some stuff inside. I didn't bother checking, just shoved it in, locked the door, and stepped back out onto the trail. That's when I paused. Something didn't feel right. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Just tired, maybe the cold was messing with my ears. But no, there was something missing. Sound. The forest was too quiet. Not peaceful. Empty. No crickets, no owls, no rustling in the brush. Even the wind had gone still. It felt like I'd stepped into a room where all the sound had been sucked down. My boots crunched on the gravel, and that was it. Every step echoed louder than it should have, like the whole world was holding its breath. I stood still, listening, waiting. Nothing. Nothing. I kept walking, trying to shake the unease, but when I rounded the curve near the tree line, I froze. Something crouched just off the trail. It was maybe 15 feet ahead, right where the gravel met the underbrush. My brain reached for the obvious label, bear. That would have made sense. Big, low to the ground, not moving. But something was wrong. I lifted my flashlight and the beam landed on it. It wasn't a bear. The face, if you could call it that, was turned straight at me. The eyes were huge and glossy, too round, like oversized marbles. Not reflective like animal eyes, just wrong. Its limbs were stretched too long, bent at strange angles. The arms hung low, like the elbows were in the wrong place. The joints didn't make sense. It looked like someone had tried to build a human from bad instructions and ran out of parts halfway through. My body locked up, and in the same breath, it stood. The motion burned in my memory, a weird, fluid stretching, like it didn't have bones. It uncoiled, up and up, until it towered over the trail, taller than any person I'd ever seen. Its knees bent the wrong way. Human-shaped, sort of, but not in any way you could believe if you looked too long. It tilted its head, slow, curious, confused. I didn't know what to do. My mouth spoke before my brain caught up. "I'm not here to bother you," I whispered, instantly regretting it. The words dropped into the silence like stones into a well. I took a step back. It moved. Not fast, matched me. Same rhythm, but it didn't walk. It slid, like the ground wasn't real, like it had only seen walking once and was trying to mimic it without knowing how legs worked. Its joints fired too late, or too early, or not at all. It didn't feel alive. It felt like something pretending. I stepped again. It followed, same pace. Always a little closer. My hands went cold. My breath came short. I turned and ran. I didn't think, just bolted down the trail, flashlight bouncing wildly, gravel spraying underfoot. I didn't hear it behind me, no footsteps, but I didn't dare stop. I fixed on the ranger station's porch light like a beacon. Solid. Real. Every so often, I glanced back. It never chased me. It was always just there, still, closer, but not moving when I looked, just standing. Like it had skipped forward while I wasn't watching. No sound, no motion. Only those wide, staring eyes catching the edge of my light. I burst into the ranger station, slammed the door, locked the deadbolt, and backed against the wall. My lungs burned. Sweat soaked my jacket. Every part of me shook. I checked the window. Nothing. Just trees again. Like nothing had ever happened. I didn't call anyone. I sat there all night, gripping the base radio, staring at the door. The silence stretched for hours. Then slowly, without warning, the night sounds returned. Wind. Crickets. Normal. By morning, the world seemed whole again. But it wasn't. At first light, I dragged 2 other workers, Brian and Delaney, out to the trail. I said maybe a bear had wandered close. We walked the curve together. My footprints were there, clear and frantic. And beside them, just sharp, jointed marks, like something caught between a bird and a person. made by something that didn't belong. Delaney stared. Brian muttered that maybe the rocks had shifted. I didn't argue. I went back to the cabin, threw my gear in the truck, and drove. My brother Mason and I were doing what we'd done since we were teenagers. Picking a day with nothing else going on, tossing some snacks in a backpack, and driving out into the mountains with no real plan. We'd been hiking Carver Ridge and the surrounding trails since high school. Grew up about an hour from there. By now, we'd worn through all the named trails, the ones with the official wooden signs and mileage markers. So we figured we'd try something new. Not a dangerous plan, just the usual dumb kind of casual we always went with. Let's drive until something looks cool and pull over. That day felt safe. Middle of the afternoon, sun high, air warm without being muggy. Not even a hint of weather. I remember thinking it was the kind of perfect hiking day you dream about when you're stuck behind a desk. We were joking in the car, sipping gas station coffee that had already gone lukewarm, arguing about whether that one band we liked in college had ever actually been good, or if we were just nostalgic idiots. Then we spotted it. A tiny gravel patch just off the main road, barely room for a single car. No other vehicles, no trailhead sign, nothing but a narrow dirt line dipping into the woods. It didn't even look official. That made it more appealing. We parked, stuffed the car key into one of those shoelace loops, and headed in. The trail climbed gradually. The woods thickened around us, but it wasn't creepy. Just quiet, peaceful even. The kind of quiet you don't notice until it stops being background and starts being the main thing you hear. We followed the path without much talking. Just the crunch of our boots, the occasional bird, some rustling in the brush. About 10 or 15 minutes in, the ground leveled out, and then we saw it. Railroad tracks. Out of nowhere, the trail just ended, and there they were. Two rusted rails half buried under leaves, warped slightly like something underground had pushed them up. Vines coiled across the wood like veins. It looked like no train had touched them in 50 years. And then we saw the bridge. Ahead of us, the tracks led to what used to be a bridge, or part of one. Most of it had collapsed. Just a twisted rib cage of beams hanging over the valley below. I don't know how it was still standing at all. Parts of the metal looked melted. Not from fire. More like time had chewed through them and left the husk. You ever see something so decayed it almost looks alive again? Like the rot has become part of the forest? That's what it felt like. We didn't say much at first. Just stood there, staring. Then Mason gave me this look, like, well, obviously we're going down there. Off we went, scrambling down the slope beside it. It was steeper than it looked. Loose rock and dirt gave way under our boots. We ended up half sliding, grabbing roots and whatever we could find for balance. Once we reached the bottom, the bridge loomed overhead. From down there, it looked even more unstable. Bolts barely clinging to the rotted wood. One beam had snapped and was just hanging in midair, like it hadn't gotten the message that gravity exists. We poked around a bit, found pieces of wood with huge rusty nails still stuck in them, a section of track that had detached and slid halfway down the hill. No signs, no markers, nothing to explain why it had been left there like that. It didn't feel like a place people were meant to find. Eventually, we decided to head back up, which was worse than coming down. My thighs were burning within minutes. I slipped twice and got a nice scrape on my palm that oozed dirt for the rest of the climb. Mason cursed every other breath. By the time we reached the trail again, both of us were soaked in sweat. He leaned against a tree, chest heaving. I bent over, hands on my knees, thinking I needed to start doing more cardio. That's when the voice started. It was a scream, from somewhere deep in the woods. Not close, but not far enough either. Just loud enough to stop both of us cold. It wasn't words, it wasn't even yelling in that help me kind of way. It was pure rage, raw and feral, stretched out too long. Like whoever was screaming didn't know how to stop. We looked at each other, didn't say anything, just listened. Then it came again, but this time not from a distance. It was suddenly right there, not approaching, not getting closer, just there. Like someone had dropped it 20 feet ahead of us out of thin air, still screaming, but sharper now. More guttural, almost glitchy. It didn't sound human anymore, not because of what it was saying. There was still no language, just that garbled fury. But because of how it was doing it, I grabbed a branch. Not a great one. Too light, but it gave me something to hold on to. Mason did the same. His knuckles looked white against the bark. I told him maybe it was just some guy lost, maybe tripping on something. Saying that helped for about 2 seconds. Then the scream moved. It didn't fade or echo. It just shifted, like someone had dragged and dropped it across a soundboard, from in front of us to the left, then the right, then behind us. The timing was too fast for footsteps. No one moves like that. It circled us. Fast, erratic, impossible. Each time it jumped, it fell closer. I swear I felt the sound vibrate through my ribs. We ran. Neither of us shouted. We just turned and sprinted. Roots, rocks, low branches, we didn't care. The screaming chased us, shifting faster now, snapping from left to right in front of us again. There was no logic to its path. It didn't follow the trail. It didn't follow the land. It just moved wherever it wanted. At one point, I tripped and slammed my shoulder into a tree. I barely felt it. My body was running on adrenaline, every nerve screaming louder than the sound itself. I kept going, chest burning, lungs on fire. Then the sound flickered. I don't know a better word for it. It glitched, like a record skipping. One moment it was behind us. Then it was overhead. Then it dropped hard to our left again. It didn't feel natural anymore. Didn't even feel physical. It was like the forest had been warped somehow. Like whatever it was didn't have to follow the rules the rest of us did. That's when I started praying. I'm not even religious. But I heard myself muttering under my breath. Just nonsense at first, then actual prayers I hadn't said in years. Begging it to stop, to go away. Mason must have heard me because he started yelling too. Only he was yelling my name, telling me to move faster, and then it stopped, just like that. Mid-scream, cut off like someone hit mute. We didn't slow down, not at first. We kept running until we saw the car. Seeing it parked there, totally normal, was one of the weirdest moments of my life. Like nothing had changed, like we'd imagined everything. We dove in, slammed the doors, sat there in silence, both of us still panting, clothes soaked through, faces pale. I looked at him finally and asked, "Did you hear it circling?" He nodded, swallowed, nodded again. "Did it sound like words to you?" Another nod. "No," he whispered. That was enough for me. We drove down the mountain in silence, not even the radio on. Every once in a while I'd check the rearview mirror, half expecting something to be following us. But there was nothing, just the trees. It wasn't until we were almost back in town that I remembered the stories. I'd heard them when I was younger. Barely paid attention at the time. Some local legend about a guy who went missing near the old tracks. People said he'd snapped out there, that he'd screamed until his voice stuck to the trees. Others said it was never a man at all, just something old. Something the forest hid when it wanted to, and let loose when it was bored. I don't know which version's true. I just know he heard something that couldn't have been a person. Something that doesn't move the way people move, that doesn't sound the way people sound. I haven't been back to Carver Ridge since, neither has Mason. The Blue Gate Mountains had been tugging at the back of my mind for years, like a to-do list item I kept circling but never checked off. When I finally carved out 3 days off from work, I didn't hesitate. I packed light, stuffed my old canvas bag with the essentials, tent tarp, water filter, stove, one change of clothes, and drove out alone. No company, no itinerary, no marked trails. I wasn't interested in the postcard version of the place. I wanted the real woods, the kind you step into and don't hear another voice all day. Day one was everything I'd hoped for. I followed an old service trail, then peeled off about 3 hours in and started cutting through undergrowth. I'd studied the topographic maps enough to know where the ridge lines were, where water should be, and how to find my way back even if I wandered. The deeper I went, the better it felt. No cell signal, no signs nailed to trees. Just layers of green, the steady rhythm of my boots, and a silence that wrapped around me like a blanket. I made camp on a slope above a stream, cooked noodles, brushed my teeth under the stars, fell asleep with the tarp flapping gently in the breeze. When I woke the next morning, everything felt normal. Boots damp from dew, shoulders stiff from the pack. I boiled water for coffee, repacked, and started moving again, following a narrow deer path that wound east into thicker forest. About an hour in, I saw something that stopped me cold. In the middle of the trail, like it had been placed there on purpose, was a rabbit, dead. At first, I figured some predator got a fox maybe, or an owl, but the closer I looked, the less that made sense. Its head wasn't just missing, it had been cleanly removed. The cut down its stomach was straight and tidy, not ripped like you'd expect from claws. No signs of a struggle. No blood spray. Just a neat little pool beneath it, and the body laid out like it was waiting for an autopsy. I crouched down, staring longer than I should have. No prints in the dirt. No drag marks. Nothing to explain how it got there. The air felt oddly still, like the woods were holding their breath. Eventually, I stood up and walked away faster than before. I told myself I was overthinking. Nature's weird. Animals do strange things. Maybe someone left it as a trap. Maybe. By midday, I was deep in thick brush, branches clawing at my sleeves, visibility dropping to 20 feet. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not behind me. Not ahead. Off to my left. Always at the edge of my vision, moving parallel. Whenever I stopped, they stopped. Whenever I picked up the pace, they did too. I paused once, hand on a tree trunk, turning my head slowly. Nothing. Just dense green. I said, "Hey, hello," half laughing, like maybe it was another hiker. No answer. Just a single bird call in the distance, then silence again. After that, I kept going. Every now and then, I'd hear a crunch, just one, and freeze. It never got closer, never further either. Always just out of reach. That evening, I stopped in a clearing between two hills and set up camp. I didn't want to. I wanted to keep moving until dark, but my legs were done. While the stove hissed, I crouched next to it, stirring noodles, and that's when I felt it. The weight of eyes on me. I turned slowly, headlamp off, relying only on the dim light of sunset. At the edge of the trees, 30 feet out, I saw a shape shift. At first, I thought it was a tree stump, or maybe a black bear. Tall, upright, still. But it moved. And then I saw him. A man, or something that used to be a man, filthy from head to toe. Hair hanging in thick ropes around his face, clothes shredded, clinging to him like seaweed. He didn't move closer, didn't speak. He crouched low, just watching. I didn't move either. My spoon hovered over the pot, body locked in place. He didn't blink, didn't shift. Then, as quietly as he appeared, he slipped backward into the woods. No sound. No rustle. Gone. I didn't sleep, didn't even get into my bag. I sat with my back against the pack, headlamp in one hand, knife in the other. All night I heard rustling circling the camp. Never close, never far. Like someone pacing the perimeter. As soon as the sky lightened, I packed up and started hiking again. No breakfast. My legs ached, but I didn't care. I just needed to move. Around midday, I found another marker, if you could call it that. A tree stripped of bark in perfect vertical lines. 6 of them, each 2 inches wide, carved from shoulder height down to the roots. Not claw marks. Too even, too controlled. Done slowly, carefully. I ran my fingers along the grooves. The wood underneath was fresh and pale. Still moist. Whoever or whatever did this did it recently. Further along, the trail thinned to a knife-edge ridge. That's where I saw them. 2 figures stood at the far end of the narrow path, barefoot, covered in filth, thin as rails, ribs showing through grime-caked skin, hair hanging like wet ropes over their faces. They didn't speak, didn't look surprised, just stood there, waiting. I raised a hand slowly, not to wave. More like, "Hey, I'm not a threat, nothing." Then the one on the left crouched low, fingers digging into dirt. The way he moved, not like a person about to run, like an animal coiling to spring. I backed up. 1 step. Another. Then I turned and ran. The ridge dropped into a steep slope, and I didn't care about footing. I barreled down, branches slapping, thorns tearing. Didn't know where I was going. Didn't care. I just needed distance. At the bottom, I hit a shallow stream. Waded through, water splashing to my knees. boots filling instantly. I clawed up the opposite bank and collapsed in the brush, gasping. And then I heard it. A high-pitched whoop, then another, then a wave of them. Not words, not laughter either, a signal. Something meant to echo through the trees. It chilled me more than anything. It sounded like hunting. I pushed myself up and kept moving. No trail, just raw forest. I didn't stop. Legs cramped, lungs burned. Still, I crashed through brush like a deer fleeing fire. Late afternoon, I stumbled onto gravel. An old fire road, half-eaten by weeds and erosion. I followed it blindly, didn't know the direction. Just forward. Eventually, a truck came around the bend. Park ranger. I must have looked like hell, mud-caked, bleeding, soaked. He rolled down his window. "You lost?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I just nodded. He gave me a lift back to the main station, offered water, tried small talk. I just stared out the window. I never told him what I saw. I didn't know how to explain it. I was 23 when I went hiking in the Pine Brush Mountains with two of my closest friends, Nate and Jess. We weren't doing anything extreme. We just wanted to spend a full day outside, away from work, away from phones, away from noise. Nate had found a loop trail online. He said it was quiet, overlooked a few valleys, and didn't get much traffic. Perfect for what we had in mind. The plan was simple: follow the loop, stop at a marked overload for lunch, then circle back before it got dark. We parked around 9 in the morning, threw our packs on, and headed out. Everything started off fine. The trail was easy to follow, wide enough to walk side by side. The trees opened up in places where you could catch a breeze. It felt good to be out there. We joked around, compared snacks, talked about dumb stuff, normal stuff. But about 20 minutes in, I noticed something strange. Not in the dramatic way, just subtle. The forest didn't sound right. There weren't any birds, not a single call. No rustling in the underbrush. Even the bugs were quiet. It was just trees, dirt, and this weird dead silence. You'd expect peace and quiet that far out, but this was too quiet. Like the air was holding its breath. I didn't say anything at first because it felt silly. But eventually Nate brought it up. He was mid-story about a guy at his office who brought fish to work every day. Then he just stopped and said, "Wait, have you heard a single bird?" Jess shrugged, said maybe it was the heat. They're probably sleeping or whatever. But even she didn't sound convinced. The deeper we went, the more that silence pressed in. Not in a horror movie way. More like we'd wandered into a part of the woods that didn't want to be found. I kept glancing back down the trail, half expecting something to be there. Nothing ever was. But that didn't help. About an hour in, we stopped near a big fallen log. I sat down, pulled off my pack, tried not to look over my shoulder. That's when Nate crouched near the edge of the trail. "Okay, what the hell is this?" he said. We walked over. It was a track. At first I thought it was a bear print. It had that depth, like something heavy had stepped there, but the shape was wrong. It wasn't round. The front edge had 5 marks that stretched forward like long fingers. No claws, no pads, no fur marks, just clean, deep impressions in the dry dirt. Jess frowned. "Is that a hand?" she asked. None of us liked that. Nate tried to play it off. Maybe a mountain lion dragging something. But even as he said it, he stepped back, like the print might move. We kept walking, quieter now. And that's when the trail started to change. A slope where the map had shown a flat stretch. A fork that didn't exist on Nate's printed guide. He checked the map 3 times, muttering, "This shouldn't be here." We chose the left path since it looked more worn. But things got stranger. A tree I swore we'd already passed showed up again 20 minutes later. A boulder shaped like a teardrop was suddenly on the wrong side of the trail. And around noon, the light shifted less direct sun, more gray like we'd walked under a screen. That's when the sound started. Not sudden, just faint. A dragging noise under our feet. Slow, heavy, like something wet being pulled through leaves. It wasn't fixed in one place, sometimes behind us, sometimes to the side. I told myself it was water, maybe an underground stream. But it moved when we moved, and it stopped when we stopped. We picked up the pace. No one was talking now. Jess had that nervous half laugh she does when she's pretending she's fine. Nate kept pulling out the map, folding it back up. I tried to focus on the trail, but I kept catching flickers between the trees. Shapes. Pale. Fast. Never more than a flash, like someone darting out of sight. Then we saw it. Not clearly, not all at once. It stepped across the trail behind us, maybe 30 feet back. I turned just in time to see it slip behind a tree. Its arms were too long. The way it moved didn't make sense. Awkward, like its joints bent the wrong way. Jess whispered, "Did you see that?" Then she started backing up. It came back a minute later. Same thing, stepping across the trail. Closer this time. I didn't say a word, just started walking faster. Jess was already moving. Nate hesitated, then followed. None of us wanted to run yet. Running felt like admitting we were being hunted. Then it made a noise, not a growl, not a voice. A sharp hiss, like air forced through torn lungs. That was it. Jess took off, full sprint. Her pack bounced behind her. Nate and I followed. We didn't look back. The dragging picked up speed. Closer now, snapping branches, rolling stones, not footsteps. Something crawling, fast and wrong. Bones scraping together under too much weight. The sound bounced through the trees like they wanted to carry it to us. We ran until I couldn't breathe. And then I did the one thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I looked back. It was there, on the trail. Tall, bent low. Bent low. Its limbs swung wide, nearly brushing the ground. Its skin was gray, stretched thin like plastic over bone. And its face, God, its face was smooth. No eyes, no nose. Just a slit, twitching open and shut in jerky motions. Like he was tasting the air, or laughing. I yelled at Jess and Nate to go faster, even though I could barely speak. We were off trail now, crashing downhill, praying gravity would take us somewhere safe. Every so often I heard that hiss again, closer than before. The dragging never stopped. It just followed. Patient. And then, without warning, it all went quiet. No hiss, no dragging, no snapping branches, just silence again. But this time, it felt different. The air felt normal, lighter. And then, a bird call, then another, flies buzzing past my ear. The sounds of a normal forest. We slowed. Jess was crying. Nate looked hollow, like he'd been wrung out. We followed the slope until we saw a trail sign, one we didn't remember passing. It pointed toward the parking area. We followed it, silent, afraid the sound might return. When the trees broke and we saw a lot, I didn't believe it was real. Families, dogs, a guy grilling hot dogs. It was like we'd stepped into another world. Jess sat down on the curb, legs giving out. Nate went straight to the map board, staring like it might change if he looked long enough. And then he said, "This isn't the trail." He was right. The bends, the slope, the overlook, we didn't see any of it on the map, not even the name. It was like we'd walked a path that didn't exist. We barely talked on the drive home. The silence in the car was heavier than the silence in the woods. We each had our own version of what happened, but no one wanted to say it out loud. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about those tracks. I searched online animal prints, forest predators, cryptid forums. Nothing matched. Nothing with a face like that. I haven't gone back to Pine Brush. My brother Clay and I had been planning this escape for months. We were both slogging through the grind, emails, deadlines, responsibilities piling up, so we plotted 3 nights in the Smoky Mountains, completely off the grid. We found an old cabin on the edge of a tiny town called Hartwell Ridge. Calling it a town might be generous. One rickety gas station, a diner that shut close to dusk, and a handful of houses clinging to the ridge like tired old hounds. By the time we pulled in, the sky was already velvet black, and the mountains loomed around us, like giants waiting just out of sight. We stopped at that gas station to fill up before dark swallowed us completely. The guy behind the counter, rough around the edges, thick drawl, stories baked into his voice, watched us shuffle in. When we leaned over the pump, he glanced at us and said, "Don't get caught on the ridges after dark, not unless you want the Stitcher finding you." He cracked a half smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes, like he was daring us to ask what that meant. Clay nudged me and asked what the hell a stitcher was. The guy just shrugged, looked away, and muttered, "Y'all don't belong out there at night." Then he dropped behind the counter, like whoever walked in next mattered more than we did. Clay scoffed, called it old mountain superstition, and we walked away, but I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Once we got to the cabin, we fed ourselves some greasy diner food. It was warm and salty and exactly what we needed, though I remember one of the burgers felt extra gritty, as if someone had pre-chewed a layer of moss into it for ambiance. Whatever. We were there to disconnect, stretch our legs, breathe something other than recycled office air. The map inside the cabin was funny, hand-drawn and faded, saying something like, "Trail to Overlook, about half-mile." We thought, why not stretch our legs in the dark? Just a casual walk under stars before bed. We grabbed our flashlights and set off. At first, the trail was nothing, just smooth dirt, wooden markers nailed to trees, a quiet squeeze of night air. We chatted about nothing, about work, old jokes. It felt easy. Then we passed a strange split log, like someone snapped it right down the middle, moss clinging at odd angles, like cheesy cake frosting. We walked on. Minutes later, I stopped. "Wait, didn't we pass that log already?" Clay looked back. "Trails loop," he said easily. "Must be another that looks the same. But that break, the moss curling just so." It was exactly the same. I glanced at Clay. He looked at me, shrugged. We moved on, but a knot in my stomach tightened. We finally reached the overlook, but the view didn't feel like relief. Dark shapes of looming trees, quiet, empty. The path hadn't forked, there was no other way, yet somehow we circled straight back. Clay stayed silent, pointing his flashlight at trees as if he expected an audience. I stared out, wondering how a path could trick you like that when you were paying attention. The return trip felt different. The forest leaned in on us. Shadows shifted. Breaths came heavier. That's when I heard it. Branches snapping. Not squirrel tiny, not simple animal bustle. These were deliberate, slow cracks, like something big walking just out of the beam. We froze. Clay flicked his flashlight one way, then the other. Nothing. Silence. Silence. Then it came again, on the other side. It was circling us. "Probably a deer," Clay said, though his voice wobbled like a bad phone connection. I forced my legs to move, slowly. The footsteps matched ours, then outpaced us, hovered in leaves just beyond the light. I swallowed, gulped air I didn't know I held. And then, barely a second later, I felt it, a hand brushing my shoulder. Cold. Certain. Slow. Slow. Fingertips dragging down the fabric of my shirt. I stiffened. My breath locked. My feet stayed planted. Clay was ahead, 10 steps away. He couldn't have done it. I whipped around, flashlight trembling. The forest stared back, quiet and empty. No one. My legs snapped loose. I yelled for Clay and ran, branches scratching at my face, roots snagging my shoes. Clay's footsteps pounded behind mine. Whatever followed kept pace, snapping branches keeping time with our frantic escape. Then, suddenly, it stopped. We crashed onto the gravel road outside the cabin. Light spilled from our flashlights, but nothing followed. Just our ragged breathing, the moonlight washing over us like a hush. Inside the cabin, every little noise sounded like proof we weren't alone. The floor creaked, the walls groaned, even the wind sighed in the corners. Neither of us dared turn on lights or break the silence. We sat in the living room, backs to the wall, wide eyes and silent mouths. Sleep didn't come. I stared at the ceiling until it went from black to a dull gray and then brightened in the morning. Clay didn't move. We didn't talk. We packed fast. We packed fast. Almost jittery, fingers buzzing. We locked up and left, didn't stop at the diner, didn't even refuel. We drove away with the gaslight blinking, but we didn't care. He never spoke of it again. I didn't ask questions. Maybe we both agreed it was better left unsaid. What I know for certain is that it wasn't brush or wind that brushed across me. It wasn't a branch or a gust of air. It was fingers. Cold. Real. Real. And that guy at the gas station was not messing around when he muttered, "Stitcher." It wasn't just a story. We weren't planning anything fancy, just a cheap weekend away, me, Julian, and our friend Mark. 3 guys with barely enough cash for gas and beer, Borrowing Julian's uncle's beat-up camper that sounded like it would fall apart every time we hit a bump. It wasn't much to look at. White peeling paint, a door that didn't close right, and a floor that creaked louder than it should have. But it had wheels, a half-functioning stove, and a place to crash without worrying about tents or rain. That was good enough for us. Julian's uncle didn't sugarcoat it when he handed over the keys. The camper hadn't been out of storage in over 10 years. He told us to expect mildew, spiders, maybe a dead mouse or two. He wasn't kidding. The thing smelled like wet cardboard and despair. We scrubbed it out the best we could, loaded it with coolers, sleeping bags, and enough junk food to survive 3 weekends, then hit the road. Our target was the Smoky Mountains. We were aiming for somewhere past Clingman's Dome, but not exactly anywhere on the map. Julian had found this obscure blog post about a half-marked trail that led off an old ranger road. It wasn't part of any maintained campground, which was the whole appeal. We didn't want picnic tables or RV hookups. The goal was isolation. Real, middle-of-nowhere kind of isolation. We parked about a mile past where the pavement ended, navigating a narrow dirt track that scraped the camper's undercarriage the whole way. No cell signal, no road signs, no trail maps. Just a faint path leading deeper into the trees and a growing sense that we were officially off the grid. The first night was typical camping stuff. We managed to get a fire going despite the damp wood, half-burned some hot dogs, drank lukewarm beer, argued about dumb things until it got too cold to pretend we were comfortable. Inside the camper, the floor was hard and the walls did nothing to block the outside cold. I kept waking up every couple of hours, sure I'd heard something. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling. Just normal forest sounds, I told myself. But still, I kept looking out the little foggy window beside my bunk. Never saw anything. Just the same motionless trees, silent and watching. In the morning, we decided to explore. The trail leading up the ridge was overgrown in spots, but we could still follow the markers. Julian was convinced it led somewhere interesting. He'd read something about old homesteads or ruins tucked away off the southern ridge. Around mid-morning, we came across a man heading the opposite way. He looked like a ranger, had the build for it and the outfit, tan hat and green jacket. But no name tag, no gear, just this tired, sun-leathered face and eyes that didn't blink much. He stopped a few feet away and looked us over, like a teacher catching kids sneaking into the teacher's lounge. He didn't say much at first, just warned us to be careful, said bears have been spotted near the ridge. Julian mentioned the ruins, trying to make conversation. The guy's whole vibe shifted. His face tightened, like someone had slapped him. Then he said something I still hear in the back of my head sometimes. There's nothing up there but rotten silence. Then he turned and walked off the path, disappearing into the underbrush like he'd been born in it. We laughed it off later. Called him Creepy Carl, made jokes about him being a forest cryptid. But his words stuck with me. Rot and silence. That's not how you talk about ruins or bad terrain. That sounded like something else. That night, Julian launched his drone. It was a cheap model, kinda clunky, but it had a thermal camera and a basic live feed. He wanted to see if there were any animals nearby, maybe catch some deer or a coyote crossing through the clearing past the creek. About 20 minutes into the flight, the feed started showing strange heat signatures. Not animals. Not people. Just flickers of warmth scattered in a rough circle around a stand of trees. They didn't move. They didn't radiate like bodies. They just pulsed, like the ground was breathing. We argued about it. Julian said it was just ground heat, maybe rocks holding sunlight. But that didn't make sense. The Smokies aren't geothermal. No vents, no hot springs, just forest and stone. We decided to check the spot out in the morning. When we found it, I felt off the second I stepped into the clearing. It was like the air changed. Lighter, but in a drained way, like the life had been sucked out of it. The trees were spaced wider, the colors washed out, like someone had turned down the saturation on the world. At the center of the clearing stood a chimney. Just a chimney. No cabin. Red brick, blackened at the top, like it had been used long after the house was gone. A half-standing wall leaned nearby, draped in vines and moss. All around were the remains of something old. Rusted nails, shattered glass, warped metal shapes that might have been tools or hinges. You could tell a cabin had stood there. Long ago. Long enough for nature to start erasing it. and then I heard humming, a woman's voice, soft, tuneless, repeating the same few notes over and over. It came from the edge of the clearing, far enough that I couldn't see anyone, close enough that it felt intentional. Without realizing, I stepped forward. The moment my boot touched the bricks at the chimney's base, the humming stopped. Not faded, just gone. Like someone had yanked the sound right out of the air. I didn't tell the others. That night, I jolted awake. The camper clock blinked 3:07. Total silence, not just quiet. Like the world had hit pause. No bugs, no wind, no creaking trees. Then I heard breathing. It was right outside. Heavy, deliberate. Just on the other side of the camper wall near my head. No footsteps. No movement. Just slow, deep exhales, like someone trying not to be noticed. 10 seconds, then nothing. In the morning, we found the footprints. Behind the camper, a half circle of bare prints. Human, but not quite right. Long toes, oddly spaced. They circled the camper twice, then vanished into the trees. No leaves disturbed. No broken twigs, just impressions in the dirt, clean and perfect. Julian still thought it was a prank, maybe some hermit out in the woods. We checked the drone footage again, hoping for answers. Nothing for most of it. Then, right before the battery gave out, something appeared at the tree line. A silhouette. Thin, long-armed. Not moving, it just stood there. Head slightly tilted, like it was listening or waiting. We didn't talk about it. We just stopped flying the drone. Later that afternoon, I found something in my sleeping bag. A scrap of fabric. Blue. Faded. Frayed at the hem, like it had been part of a dress. It was dry but smelled faintly of damp leaves. I hadn't packed it. Neither had Julian or Mark. They swore they hadn't touched my stuff. And I'd been alone in the camper that morning while they were down by the creek. We argued again. But what were we going to do? It's not like we could go to the ranger station and say, "A ghost dropped a cloth in my bag." Then the fog came. By late afternoon, it was thick enough to blot out the trail. Even standing next to the fire, we could barely see each other. Sound was swallowed up in it. Everything felt closer, like the woods were pushing in on us. And that's when the whispering started. It wasn't loud. More like murmurs just beyond the edge of hearing. None of us wanted to admit it, but we all went quiet. We sat in the camper with the lights on, staring at nothing, pretending nothing was wrong. But it circled us. Low voices moving around the camper, like people talking in another room behind a wall. Julian cracked the window to hear better. Something tapped the glass, just once. Sharp, like a fingernail. We shut the window, turned on every light, slept with them on. Nobody talked about it the next morning. We didn't need to. We were done. We packed fast and hit the trail. But 20 minutes in, the path split. 2 forks. Where we were sure there had only been one, we picked the left. It felt right. An hour later, we came back into the same clearing. Same trees, same rocks. Same crushed grass from our tires, only now the chimney was whole again. No vines, no crumbling. Perfect red brick, and smoke curling out of the top, like someone had just lit a fire inside. I stepped forward without thinking. It was like my body moved ahead of my brain. Like someone tugged a string inside my chest. Julian shouted, but it sounded far away. Muffled, like he was underwater. I took another step. The humming returned. All around us. Close. Then, without warning, everything stopped. The smoke vanished. The chimney began to fall. Brick by brick in slow motion, like it had been holding itself together just for me, and finally gave in. I turned and ran. We ran for hours. No path, no direction, just away. Through brush, over rocks, past trees we didn't recognize. Finally, we broke onto a gravel road and collapsed. A truck found us nearly an hour later. The driver didn't ask much, just stared at us like we'd climbed out of a hole. Said we were lucky we didn't end up in Widow's Hollow. I was 21 when it happened. We'd been talking about it since college. A real hiking trip. The idea started small, like most dumb ideas do. A few beers, a long weekend, maybe a day hike somewhere nearby. But it kept growing. Turned into a week-long trip through parts of the Smoky Mountains, carrying everything we needed on our backs. Tents, food, clothes, maybe a flask or two. It sounded perfect in theory, one of those we-set-your-brain kind of adventures. I think all three of us were quietly hoping for something we couldn't really name, some sense of peace or clarity, or maybe just not feeling burned out at 21. We packed light, or tried to. The kind of light that still meant overloaded backpacks and duct-tape gear. Derek brought the map. Mason brought a tiny hatchet he wouldn't shut up about. I brought way too many granola bars. None of us were exactly seasoned hikers, but we'd watched enough YouTube videos to fake it. The first few days were great. Hard, but in a good way. We stuck to less popular trails, ones Derek found on forums or remembered from a family trip years back. Hike during the day, find a spot in the evening, set up camp, cook whatever we had energy for, then crash early. It all blurred together in this calm rhythm. Wake up sore, hike, eat, sleep, repeat. Everything smelled like dirt and sweat, and honestly, it was kind of amazing. We didn't see many people, which we liked. Maybe one or two hikers the first day, then none after that. The deeper we went into the woods, the quieter everything felt. No service, no screens. Just boots on dirt and the occasional squirrel that always sounded way bigger than it was. By the fourth day, we were tired in that deep, satisfying way. Not just in our bodies, but in our heads, like our brains had finally powered down. That evening, Derek pointed out a spot off one of the narrower trails. Said he'd camped there with his uncle years ago. A small clearing surrounded by tall trees. Enough light for a fire, but sheltered. Perfect. Perfect. We set up our tents in a triangle around an old, half-buried fire pit. Mason joked we were probably sleeping on top of some long-dead scout troop. We laughed, but not for long. We were too worn out. Dinner was just the last of our noodles, boiled over a tiny stove while we passed around the last of the jerky. We sat around the fire for a while, watching the flames sink into embers. Derek started telling a story about getting lost on a school trip. Mason kept interrupting with fake ghost noises. Normal stuff. Easy. Like we could have stayed that way forever. Eventually, I peeled off first. My legs felt like concrete, and my sleeping bag was calling. I heard them still talking as I zipped my tent, but their voices faded fast once I lay down. I don't know what time I woke up. Middle of the night, definitely. The air was cold. My throat felt dry. At first, I just lay there, trying to figure out what pulled me awake. No dreams. No sudden noise, I remembered. Just this weight. This strange stillness. Then I heard it. Someone calling my name. It wasn't loud. It was quiet in that way that makes you listen harder. Drawn out. He, followed by my name, stretched thin. I blinked, trying to wake up more. Thought maybe one of them had gone out to pee and was messing with me. I sat up and unzipped the tent a few inches. Whispered back, "What do you want?" No answer. Across the clearing, both tents looked untouched. Zipped up, still. No headlamps, no movement, nothing. Then it came again. My name, closer this time. Still soft but clearer. It sounded like Derek. Exactly like him. Except, it didn't feel like him. Something was off. The voice was hollow, like it was trying too hard. Like someone had played a clip of him and slowed it down just a bit. My heart thudded heavy in my chest. I unzipped the flap all the way and shined my flashlight into the trees. Nothing. Just trees and brush. Then the footsteps started. Not fast, not loud. Just a steady crunching on dry leaves. But wrong. No rhythm. Like someone walking after only seeing a video of walking once. Steps speeding up, stopping too long, dragging like one foot was stuck. They circled us. You could hear them behind trees, shifting direction, pausing. I swung the flashlight back and forth, half expecting to catch someone crouched behind a trunk. Nothing. Then came the laugh, or something like it. A low, rattling wheeze, like a laugh clawing out through a chest full of fluid. The voice followed. "Come out." Still Derek's voice. Still wrong. That was enough. I scrambled out of my tent and ran straight for Derek's. I yanked his zipper down and shook him hard. He came up swinging, cursing, eyes wild. Before I could explain, the thing called again. This time, his name. In his own voice. He froze. I froze. His eyes locked on mine. He mouthed, "You heard that too?" We went to Mason's tent. He was snoring like a chainsaw. Derek grabbed his arm. I shook his shoulder until he woke up confused and annoyed. He started to ask what the hell we were doing. Then the voice called again. "Mason, just once." Perfectly in his tone. He shut up. We didn't need to talk about it. We knew. We grabbed what we could. Sleeping bags stuffed into packs without folding. Food left behind. Tent poles still in the ground. Nothing tied down. We just started walking. Headlamps on, eyes forward. The voices followed. They didn't shout. They whispered, over and over. Sometimes soft, sometimes sharp, sometimes curious, sometimes mocking, mostly perfect. Every now and then they slipped, drew out a vowel too long, changed tone halfway through, or all three names came at once, mashed together like bad audio playback. We didn't talk, couldn't. If one of us spoke, I think it would have broken whatever control we had left. Whenever we slowed, the footsteps returned. Close enough to hear, never close enough to see. Always circling, keeping pace. Never rushing, like it didn't need to. We walked for hours, or what felt like hours. Every bend looked the same. Every patch of trees felt identical. My legs burned. My mouth stayed dry. I don't remember stopping once, not even to drink. Finally, the trail widened. The trees thinned. The faint outline of the ranger station appeared in the distance. The voices stopped. No fading. No goodbye. 1 second they echoed around us. The next, silence. We collapsed on the gravel outside the station. My knees hit hard. The silence felt too big, like we'd stepped out of something and back into the world. We didn't talk, not for a long time. Just sat there shaking, breathing like we'd run a marathon. When the Rangers arrived at sunrise, none of us said a word. What could we have told them? That something in the woods had learned our voices and wore them like masks? We never went back for our deer, didn't care. And we've never hiked together since. I was camping solo in the Blue Hollow Range the first time I heard about the ridge. You probably haven't heard of Blue Hollow. Most people haven't. It's part of a less populous stretch of the southern Appalachians. Not quite the Smokies, not quite the Blue Ridge. Tucked between them like something forgotten. That's what drew me in. I'd done most of the big trails before. Shenandoah and Pisgah, even sections of the AT. I liked solitude. Places where the map got blurry and the signs started to rot. I didn't go looking for danger, not really. I just liked quiet places where things still felt untouched. So I pulled into this little ranger outpost outside of Milner, Tennessee. Midweek, barely anyone around. There was this guy behind the counter, mid-60s, maybe older. Wore one of those stiff canvas shirts with the old-style patches. Had that tired face you see on people who've lived through more than they talk about. I asked if there were any quiet loops nearby. Specifically said I was looking for a route that didn't get much traffic. The moment I said it, his face changed. Just slightly, but it did. He leaned back in his chair and squinted at me. Then, without any big warning or drama, he just said, "There's a ridge trail north of Kepler Fork. Not maintained anymore. Locals avoid it." Naturally, I asked why. He hesitated. Then he sighed, leaned forward and started talking like he was reading from some internal script he didn't like reciting. Said people had gone missing up there over the years. Not often, maybe 1 or 2 a decade. But it wasn't just that. It was the search teams that came back different. Not physically hurt, not hysterical, just confused. One guy swore he walked the same half-mile clearing 3 times in a row. Another claimed the trees moved when his back was turned. Someone else said they found footprints that started in the middle of a dry creek bed, as if someone had just materialized there. They call it local legend, he said. I call it a good reason to stay on the marked trails. But the way he said it, it didn't feel like a warning for tourists. It felt like a rule, the kind you don't break even if you don't know why. I nodded, thanked him, and left. Then, of course, I did the opposite of what he said. The trail he mentioned wasn't on the official map, but you could still find the old path if you looked. Faint, overgrown, barely more than a suggestion of a trail. I had my GPS and compass, extra water, backup batteries, the works. I wasn't being reckless. I figured the story was just local folklore, something to scare kids or keep people from trampling an old part of the park. I reached the ridge by late afternoon and found a level patch just below the crest. Good spot. Some old stones nearby, maybe from an old fire ring, though they'd scattered a bit. I rebuilt it, got a small fire going, cooked some noodles, wrote a few lines in my trail journal, and leaned back against my pack. I thought about the ranger's tone, the flatness of it. Not dramatic, not spooky, just resigned. I'd heard campfire stories before. This didn't feel like that. But even as the thought crossed my mind, I brushed it off. I zipped up the tent and went to sleep. Around dawn, I woke up with this weird sensation, not fear exactly, just that something had shifted. I unzipped the tent and stepped out into the early light. The fire ring was gone. I mean gone, not just scattered. The rocks were nowhere in sight. The ground where the fire had been was smooth. No ash, no charcoal, nothing. Just unmarked soil, slightly damp with morning dew. My tent was still there. My pack was still resting against the same tree. Everything else, the layout, the angle of the slope, the trees nearby, it all looked just slightly off. Like the world had been copied and pasted, but not perfectly. I stood there for a while, trying to explain it away. Maybe I'd moved in the night and didn't remember. Maybe I'd built the fire somewhere else and just forgot. But I'm methodical. I always set up the same way. I triple-checked my gear. Nothing about this made sense. Still, I packed up and decided to head back toward the main trail. I figured even if I'd gotten turned around somehow, I'd reorient quickly. About an hour into the hike, I came across a fork, no markers, two equally beaten paths. I didn't remember passing it yesterday. Neither direction looked more familiar than the other. I picked the left one. It dropped down into a shallow gully, then curved through a stand of birch. When I climbed back out, I froze. I was standing at my own campsite, same fire ring rebuilt, same tree, same tent still flattened from packing. Even the indent in the dirt where I'd sat the night before, I just stood there staring, trying to do the math in my head. Had I looped somehow? Was there another identical campsite nearby? But deep down, I knew. There was no loop. I'd walked a straight line. So I pulled out my knife and started marking trees as I walked, deep gouges, not just scratches, slashes through the bark. I kept going for 15 minutes. Then I turned back. Nothing. The trees were clean, bark smooth, unbroken, like I'd never touched them. That's when I started hearing things. Not voices, not animals, just inconsistencies. A snap behind me that didn't echo right. The distant rustle of brush that seemed too far, then too close. I spun around more than once, but nothing was ever there. And the trail, if you could call it that, started to shift. Trees moved, I swear they did. Roots curled up where there'd been none. Rocks changed shape. Once, I stepped over a fallen log, then saw the same log ahead of me 10 minutes later. I started muttering to myself, "Dung stuff. Keep going. Just keep moving. Stay straight," like I was trying to remind myself of gravity. Mid-afternoon, I stumbled onto a fallen trunk and sat down. I was soaked in sweat, lightheaded. I figured I'd rest, drink some water, check my bearings. That's when I saw it. My name, carved into the log. Deep, burned around the edges. Not fresh old, weathered. Emery. I hadn't done it. I hadn't even seen that log before. But my name was there, like it had been waiting. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe for a few seconds. Then I stood up and walked. I didn't know where. I just couldn't sit on that log. As the sun dropped lower, I caught the smell of smoke again. Subtle, like someone tending a fire a few sites over. I turned toward it, praying it was a person. Anything familiar? Eventually, I found it. The fire ring. My fire ring. Rebuilt exactly as I'd made it the night before. Same stones. Same little crescent-shaped burn mark from where I dropped a noodle pack. Ash still faintly glowing. But the tent? Gone. Gone. Only the pack remained, propped against the same tree. At that point, I didn't move. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, knife in hand, trying to keep my breathing steady. The woods were dead silent. At some point, maybe around 3 in the morning, I noticed something small. My journal was back, opened, lying beside the pack. A page torn out. That did it. At first light, I threw on the pack and just walked. No compass, no map, just feet pounding dirt. I didn't care if the trail twisted or warped. I just kept moving. I ignored the forking paths. I refused to look behind me. Once I thought I saw someone crouched beside a tree, but I didn't stop. I never stopped. And somehow, Somehow, I hit a gravel road. Fell to my knees when I saw it, thought it was a mirage. Hours later, a truck rolled up, maintenance crew, 2 guys in reflective vests. I don't remember what I said. I think they thought I was dehydrated or on something. They gave me a ride back. The ranger was still at the station. He looked at me, took one long look, and didn't ask a single question. Just handed me a bottled water and walked away. It started out like any other weekend trip. My friends and I had been talking about going to the Smoky Mountains for a while. It was the perfect spot for us. We all shared a love for nature, hiking, camping, and just getting lost in the woods for a few days. The mountains were calling, and we were more than ready to answer. There were 4 of us, me, my best friend Jake, and then Ryan and Ben. We'd all been friends since high school, and even though we were pretty different in a lot of ways, there was an unspoken bond between us. We were like brothers, really. That Friday afternoon, we piled into my truck, ready to leave behind the chaos of school and work. The long drive ahead was just an excuse to talk and joke around. After a few hours, we were deep into the Smokies. The roads got smaller, winding tighter, and the trees seemed to grow closer, like we were leaving the world behind. We didn't have any specific spot in mind, just a vague idea of where we wanted to end up. We'd done enough camping over the years to know that the beauty of nature was in the unpredictability. It was about finding that perfect remote spot where no one else had thought to go. By the time we found the perfect spot, it was getting dark. The air was cool and crisp with that sharp bite you only get in the mountains. The kind of air that clears your head and fills your lungs with something fresh. We found a small creek running through the clearing surrounded by tall trees. It was so quiet, like the forest had been waiting for us. The kind of quiet that wraps around you like a blanket. We knew right away this was the place. There was something almost sacred about it. No one around, just us, the creek, and the thick forest. We set up camp quickly, each of us knowing what needed to be done. Tents up, a fire going, and after a long week, the first beers cracked open. The crackle of the flames mixed with the sounds of the night. Crickets, a distant owl, the murmur of the creek. We spent the evening just talking, laughing, the kind of light conversation that flows easily between old friends. The day-to-day world felt miles away. We were so wrapped up in the easy rhythm of our surroundings that we forgot the usual stress, the work, the school, the expectations. We just let go, but it didn't take long for something to feel off. Not immediately, not in a way you could really point to, but there was a shift. It started small, like a quiet tension in the air, and then it built. The way you feel when something's just not right, but you don't know why. I couldn't place it. Not at first. We'd been around the woods enough to know that nature has a rhythm, a pattern. The sounds of the wind through the trees, the distant calls of animals, the rustling of leaves, they all blended into something familiar, something comfortable. But after a while, all those sounds seemed to just stop, not abruptly but gradually, until the only sound was the crackle of the fire. The silence grew. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind of silence that makes you uneasy, like the world had paused for a moment. Jake was the first to notice. He had been staring into the darkness beyond the campfire, his posture suddenly tense. There was something about the way he stood up, the way his body froze, that made me pay attention. I followed his gaze into the night, trying to see what he saw. "You hear that?" he asked, his voice low, almost hesitant, as if he were afraid of what he might say. We all fell quiet. Ryan stopped fidgeting with his beer can, and Ben turned his head slightly, eyes darting to the trees. There was a shift in the air, like the woods themselves had stopped moving. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. At first, I didn't hear anything, just the wind maybe, a rustle of leaves. But then it came again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. They weren't the light footfalls of a deer or any other animal. These were heavier, measured, like they were purposeful, and they were coming from the trees, right where the darkness pressed against the firelight. I looked at Jake. His eyes were wide, his hand resting on the handle of the hatchet by his side. He had the same expression I was feeling but didn't know how to express, something between curiosity and dread. "Anyone else hear that?" he asked, his voice a little higher now, a tremor sneaking into it. Ryan frowned. "Probably just an animal," he said, trying to sound reassuring. But his voice wasn't steady. He wasn't buying it either. Ben, on the other hand, was staring hard into the woods. I could tell he was trying to convince himself that it was nothing, but his face told a different story. He was scared. We all were. Jake wasn't having it. "That's no animal," he said, his voice firm now, like he was trying to force us all to understand it. There was no denying it, not anymore. That sound was wrong. The footsteps stopped, and with them, all sound. The woods had gone deathly quiet. We just stood there for a moment, no one saying anything. My heart was pounding in my chest. The fire crackled in the eerie stillness, a small, insignificant sound compared to the silence that surrounded us. I glanced around at the others, hoping someone would say something, anything. But we all knew what we were feeling. And then, another sound. A low growl. It was deep, too deep to come from anything natural. It rumbled through the air, unsettling in its guttural quality. It wasn't an animal. It was more human. Something distorted, like it came from a place where voices shouldn't be. My skin prickled. I glanced over at Jake, whose face had turned a shade paler. He swallowed hard. "Who's there?" His voice was shaking now, but there was still some defiance in it, like he was hoping whoever or whatever it was might answer. No answer came. The growl came again, louder this time, and closer. The sound seemed to vibrate through the air. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't breathe. The air around us felt heavier, like it was pressing down on us. It was as if the entire forest had gathered around us, watching, waiting. I wanted to move, to run, but my legs felt like they were glued to the spot. Something moved from the edge of the clearing. Slowly. It wasn't a person, at least not in any way that made sense. At first, I thought it was someone else, some lost camper maybe. But the moment it stepped into the dim glow of the firelight, I froze. It wasn't human. It was tall. Too tall. Too tall. Its limbs were long, impossibly long, and they stretched in ways they shouldn't. It moved like it wasn't bound by any natural law, fluid, almost. There was no sound as it moved. It didn't step like a person, more like it was floating just above the ground. It stopped just at the edge of the firelight, its shadow stretching long across the clearing. We all stood there, frozen, staring. It didn't speak, but it didn't need to. Its presence was enough. Jake, still trying to hold on to some sense of control, called out again, his voice tight with fear. "Who are you?" No answer. The figure didn't respond. It took a slow step forward, and as it did, something strange happened. The shadows around it seemed to shift, like they were alive, curling around its form, clinging to it like a cloak. I could feel the temperature drop around us. The fire, for a second, flickered as if it were trying to retreat. And then I saw its face. I don't even know how to describe it. It wasn't a face, not in any human sense. The skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched thin like something that had been drained of life. Its eyes were like black voids, no pupils, no irises, just dark, endless, hollow pits. I couldn't look away. I swear for a second I thought I might fall into them, sucked into that deep, empty darkness. But the worst part wasn't the eyes, it was its mouth. There were no lips, no softness, just rows and rows of jagged, sharp teeth gleaming like they had been carved from stone. And when it smiled, it wasn't a smile. Not at all. It was more like a grin, like it was sizing us up, like it was hungry. My stomach twisted in on itself. It opened its mouth. The growl changed. It deepened, turning into something worse, something almost musical. It vibrated in the air, resonated in my bones. The sound sent a chill through me, cold enough to freeze my blood. Without thinking, I grabbed a stick from the fire and threw it at the figure. It was a stupid move, a desperate one, but it was all I could think to do. The stick hit the ground at its feet, sending sparks into the air. The figure jerked back, its head snapping in a way that wasn't human, like it was made of rubber. Its form contorted, morphed in front of our eyes, shifting like liquid, its body elongating, stretching into something even worse. It wasn't just tall now, it was monstrous. Its limbs twisted, its face warped, until it was something unrecognizable, something out of a nightmare. And then, just like that, it was gone. 1 second, it was standing there, looming over us, and the next, it was swallowed up by the trees. Vanished. Disappeared as if it had never been there at all. We didn't say a word for what felt like hours. The fire crackled in the silence, but no one spoke. None of us had the words for what we had just witnessed. The rest of the night was a blur. We huddled by the fire, too terrified to sleep, too afraid to even move. The woods around us felt wrong. Alive, yes, but in a way that wasn't natural. Too many odd noises, too many shifting shadows. We all sat in silence, watching the trees, expecting it to return at any moment, but it never did. By morning, we packed up without a word. No one even suggested sticking around. No one felt like hiking. We just piled into the truck and drove, the sound of the engine almost a comfort compared to the silence of the woods. I don't know what we encountered that night, but I know one thing: it wasn't human. Whatever it was, whatever it could be, it wasn't from this world.